We are in the Knesset, and today I'm interviewing Amir Ohana, member of Knesset for the Likud Party. And Amir, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to interview you here in your office in the Knesset. Last time we did it in my studio in London, but now I'm in Israel in the Knesset.
So it is my utmost pleasure to host you here at the Knesset. I remember our last interview was very interesting, and I enjoyed it very much.
Excellent. And let's start off with where you think Israel is today. I mean, this year has been an historic year. It's Israel's 70th anniversary as a nation reborn. We've seen that President Trump has recognized Israeli sovereignty over your eternal city, Jerusalem, and we've seen he's moved the embassy. And also we see that the US administration is really gearing up its entire foreign policy to protect Israel and the Jewish people. So what do you make of where Israel is at 70 today?
You have talked, rightfully so, about the moving of the embassy, the American embassy, to Jerusalem. And we do believe that it is not only America that would move their embassy, but more and more countries in our lifetime, I'm not talking about the far future, will move their embassies to Jerusalem, recognizing that a Jewish people who yearned and dreamed of Jerusalem for 2,000 years, and this is something unimaginable. If you would think about it, people from Iraq, Yemen, Poland, Russia, wherever the Jewish people have been in the diaspora, were dreaming the same dream, the same thing for 2,000 years, next year in Jerusalem. Well, we are back to Jerusalem, but never to leave again. And now it is not only the Israelis who consider it to be Jerusalem, their capital city, but also the Americans. And I'm hearing that the Prime Minister of Australia, just these past few days, has been talking to our Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he told him that he considers to move the Australian embassy as well to Jerusalem. This is something historical in every way you look at it. Not only that, we have the Iran deal, which we have considered to be destructive and a great threat to the existence, to the very existence of our states and of peace in the region. And the American administration moved out of it and put the sanctions back on, which means Iran will find it very, very difficult, very hard to continue and funding their ballistic program, their nuclear program, and being the #1 funding of terror worldwide, but in particular in our region.
Amir, can you share with us the contrast between the previous President Obama and his policies towards Israel and the Middle East and that of President Trump and his administration? What is he doing differently?
The largest difference, I think, is that President Trump, unlike President Obama and many in the international leadership in Europe, realizes that the Israeli-Arab conflict will not be resolved in Washington, nor in Brussels, but only here by the Israelis and the Arabs. And because we are the ones that would have to live or die with the consequences. And I think President Trump realizes that. I do not believe that President Obama realized it, but he had an idea that he knows what the solution should be. It's called the two-state solution, which I do not consider as a solution. And this is the one and only path that will achieve peace. Mind you, the Israeli-Arab conflict did not begin at 1967. It began way before. And the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which is sometimes considered for some strange reason to be a partner for peace, was established back at 1964, which is interesting because there was not one settlement, not one Jewish soldiers on Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem or the West Bank back at 1964. So what was it that they wanted to liberate Palestine from? Or rather, should we say, what is Palestine? Is it really Ma'ale Shomron and Otniel and Efrat as they claim, or is it really Yafo and Akko and Haifa and Tzfat and everything that we consider as the state of Israel? Now, my colleagues from the left would say, Yeah, you're right. That was 1964, but this is 2018. They moved ahead. They are willing to compromise. Why won't you? And I'm asking them, have they? When in every pro-Palestinian demonstration, on European campus, on American campus, on Israeli campus, you would still hear the same old slogan saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We have the map here. Take a look. There's the river, there's the sea, this is the state of Israel. Where does it put us? Taking swimming lessons in the Mediterranean, of course.
But that's also incitement to genocide, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
So therefore we have mass Palestinian rallies that are filled with hate, but essentially people that are caught up in that movement are effectively calling for genocide. Has the position of the PA begin to change now that the Trump administration are putting huge pressure on the Palestinian Authority? What do you think their reaction is going to be to actually stopping their diplomatic operations in Washington, freezing their accounts, stopping the funding for their state, which is used to fund and support terror?
Unfortunately, I still can't say that the PA's position has changed. They still, to this day, pay salaries and bonuses to murderers, to killers. They still glorify those very murderers that slaughter our citizens it used to be on a weekly basis, but now I can say less, but still it exists. And it is the same old narrative of not 1967 borders. You know, Abbas Zaki is a very high-rank official of the PLO, and he says on camera, you can find it, we are talking about the 1967 borders. We know, and the president knows, once the Israelis will withdraw there, we can take them. But don't say it. The world doesn't want to hear it. It is not proper diplomacy. And this is the narrative, and this is what we are fighting against.
But would you say with the growing strategic trends in the Middle East, particularly this growing alliance between...
Mahmoud Abbas is coming to its end.
Yeah.
I don't know how long he's going to still rule the Palestinian Authority. I can tell you that we don't know who will it be after him and which path will they choose to go. But if the path would be a peaceful one, there is nothing that we would like more, because we do believe that the Arabs are not going away, as well as we are not going away. The only way to prosper, the only way to have peace in the region, which everyone wants, is to build bridges between us, which the Palestinian Authority does not do.
But in light of that, don't you think that the PA now is out of step with what's happening in the Middle East? For example, Israel's growing strategic ties to the Gulf states, to Saudi Arabia, to Egypt and Jordan, because they're recognizing the bigger threat is coming from the Iranians. So how are the Palestinians going to play themselves in this new emerging Middle East?
It's a very good question, a very unique situation in the Middle East when you can find the only place in the world where Shiites and Sunnites combine together to fight the Israelis. That is Hamas. Hamas is being funded by Iran. Now, Hamas are Sunnites, very, very clearly, and the Shiites, of course, Iranians are very, very against each other. Normally, usually, they would fight each other, but when Israel is on the map, they combine together. Now, whether or not the Palestinian Authority will go in that path or the other, it only depends on the future leadership of it, which we still don't know, as I said before. I am not very optimistic. When I see the streets and when I see the narrative and when I see the way that they are moving to, I cannot say I'm very optimistic. But what I am optimistic about is that very windows of opportunity that you were mentioning before with other Sunnite countries. We have an unprecedented cooperation and relations with, of course, Jordan and Egypt, but it is unprecedented the depth of the relations. And we have other Arab countries that we are in good context with, better and better. Right now it's not openly, but I have a good reason to believe that in the near future, it will also be open. And this means that there is an opportunity for peace. There is a chance for peace, because those countries who are very significant might affect the Palestinian Authority to go on the right path, on the path of peace and building bridges between us. It doesn't mean that they have to give up anything that they have right now. You know, between a one-state solution and a two-state solution, there is a one-and-a-half-state solution, which means the Palestinian Authority, the residents of the Palestinian Authority, will still live under the Palestinian judicial system, education system, police system, and they will vote for the Palestinian Authority as they have at 2006. But those who live under the sovereignty of the Israeli police system, judicial system, and political system votes for this body, for the Knesset. Everyone between the river and the sea gets to vote and take responsibility for the future. Now, it is by all means not an ideal solution, if you can call it a solution, but it is the lesser evil.
Can I talk to you about last night's incident? As filming today, we saw that a Hamas rocket hit a house in Beersheba, which is some distance away. And now there's a fear that this could escalate. Do you think there is a prospect now, with all the trouble going on in Gaza, and particularly now that Hamas are feeling the heat, that we could see another war break out very soon between Israel and Hamas?
It's not a matter of if, but rather a matter of when. You know, there is no question that Hamas is a terror organization totally devoted to the destruction of Israel and the killing of as many Jews as possible. It doesn't only say it, it is written in their covenant, but they also demonstrate it by deeds throughout the years. Some of the most horrific terror attacks that we have known came from Hamas. So we do realize that it's a matter of time, and the time might have come. Our power of deterrence has been declining since 2014, when we have the protective edge operation, and then Hamas got the toughest hit that they got from the existence of Hamas. And we had 4 years of quiet. We had 4 years of zero casualties from Gaza, which is unprecedented since 1967. More than 50 years, until the past few months. Now we have lost our soldier Aviv Levi, and we miraculously didn't lose any other souls this night, when a Grad missile fell on a house in Beersheba and demolished it. If the residents of that house didn't be in a protective area, we would have lost them. So it is possible that things are escalating. We are trying to bring peace and quiet to our citizens by diplomatic means. Egypt is involved, but if it doesn't work, we will have to go to military steps, and we are fully prepared for that. And Hamas will realize what a mistake it was to shoot missiles, or to allow others shoot missiles at Israel, because they are in control on the Gaza Strip, and they are fully responsible for everything that happens from Gaza Strip. This is the way we see it, and this is the way it should be. Then we will have more years of quiet, but still we are not under any illusions. It will not bring us peace. You know, those who told us a few years ago, at 2005, that we should disengage from the Gaza Strip, because then Gaza would become the Singapore of the Middle East. They will build hotels, they have a beautiful strip by the shore, they will invest in education, healthcare, everything that normal people who wants to live does. But we didn't fall to that illusion. I mean, unfortunately, the Israeli government back then, headed by our Prime Minister, our late Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, did it. But we had no illusions. And, the current Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was back then in the opposition, because he resigned from the Minister from the position of Minister of Finance, and he did it saying that Gaza would become Hamastan,
Yep.
would be controlled by Hamas. We will get rockets and we will get shot at, and this is exactly what happened. And we know that what Gaza became is not the Singapore of the Middle East, but rather Hamastan of the Middle East. We got tunnels underneath our villages that would go and kill more and more Israelis. We got missiles that will go further and further to kill more and more Israelis. This is what we got. So we are not illusioning that we are near peace. I do think that throughout the generations, only if we will be based on two major pillars, education and economy, we have a chance for peace, and we can do that.
Amir, I'd love to know your views and opinions on the security situation in the north. Hezbollah have something like 160,000 rockets and missiles poised at Israel from southern Lebanon. We see that, for example, Iranian Revolutionary Guards are 30 miles from Israel's border in the Golan Heights. Could you see an escalation in that conflict on the north, and could Israel face a war against Iran in Syria? And also, how does the Russian involvement in Syria complicate the situation?
Absolutely one of the most major concerns that we have. If I would have to prioritize, I would say that the risks and dangers that comes from Gaza are lesser than the ones coming from up north, because there we have Hezbollah, we have Iran, and it's very complex because we have also the Syrian military, we have the Russians in the region. So it is much more complex. Fortunately, we have Benjamin Netanyahu as a prime minister. And he is, to the best of my knowledge, the only state leader in the world that enjoys good, some would say intimate relations with the leaders of the two superpowers of United States with President Trump and Russia with President Putin. I don't think President Putin had met any other foreign leader as much as he have met Netanyahu. And in those meetings, we, of course, try to coordinate and to facilitate the way that we will defend ourselves in the north. And it is a matter of self-defense. We cannot allow a regime that openly calls for the elimination of the State of Israel and destruction of the State of Israel, which the Iranian government does, to operate in our area. Now, they initially came saying we need to help our ally, Assad, against Daesh. Well, now that Daesh or ISIS is diminished, at least militarily wise, not ideologically wise, this, I think, we will still face for many, many years, especially in Europe. But at least militarily wise, they have diminished. Now, can we ask Iran to go back to Iran? They are no longer needed in this region anymore. But they don't. Why is it that they don't? Because they are building the option to not only say that Israel should be destroyed, but to do it. This is something that everyone who cherishes peace and stability in the region should oppose to.
Absolutely. We share a common friend in Sharon Claff, who...
This was another incident that happened tonight.
Sadly was attacked in an anti-Semitic incident. What are your views on the rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing in Britain and in Europe, and particularly a leader like Jeremy Corbyn, who's the head of Her Majesty's opposition in Britain, could potentially become Prime Minister, knowing that he holds very disturbing anti-Semitic views, calls Hezbollah and Hamas his friends, and says that the Black September are his brothers?
Look, any person who calls Hamas, which in Section 7 of their covenant yearns, and I quote, to the day when the rocks and the trees, al-shajjar wal-hajjar in Arabic, would shout, "O Muslim, slave of the Lord, there is a Jew behind me, come and slaughter him," cannot call himself a friend of Israel or a friend of the Jewish people, but an enemy of the Jewish state and an enemy of the Jewish people. And it is not very surprising, very unfortunate, but not very surprising that Sharon Clough, a Jew mutual friend of ours who is very active, a very pro-Israel active, came to a pro-Corbyn meeting to protest against the anti-Semitism, and she was thrown out. This is how pluralistic this meeting was, and later assaulted, kicked in the head a few times, and she's, I believe, hospitalized. This is anti-Semitism. This is pure anti-Semitism. This is something that the world has seen before. This is something that we recognize when we see it, and we should all fight against, because it is exactly the other side of Charlie Hebdo,
Yep.
Hyper Kasher, everything that those radical Muslims did in Europe, killing many, many lives. They were enemies of the free world. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. They are the enemies of that. And if we are calling ourselves the free world who supports Western values, values of freedom, values of equality, we should stand up together, not divided. Stand up together to fight those values. And unfortunately, I see people who call themselves Westerns who stand up with those very radical Islamic forces. Not against them, but alongside with them.
Absolutely. And also, we see that with the rise of anti-Semitism, and this is something that's shocking because we haven't seen it this bad for over 70 years, pre-World War II, and we know how that resulted in. But, you know, if there wasn't a Jewish state here, if there wasn't the state of Israel, what do you think the situation facing Jews around the world would be? And this is something I think that everyone needs to understand, that if it wasn't for Israel, where would the Jewish community be worldwide?
Some people claim that if there was not Holocaust, there wouldn't have been a Jewish state. It's the other way around. If there was a Jewish state, there would be no Holocaust. And unfortunately, I have to say that if we didn't have our state, I'm not sure that we wouldn't have witnessed a second Holocaust. In Europe, maybe other places, but this is the raison d'être, the reason of existence, one of the reasons of existence of the State of Israel, to make sure that when we say never again, we mean never again. This is something I expect every decent human being to stand with. Now, you may have disagreements with Israeli policies on this and on that. But this is something that should be a humanitarian consensus. Never again.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. I'm here attending a Christian media summit in which the Israeli government press office, together with the Israeli Foreign Ministry, have invited Christian broadcasters from around the world to be here in Jerusalem to see what that close ties and relationship. Can you talk about the important relationship between Israel and the Christian community?
Absolutely, absolutely. Israel is the cradle of existence of all three monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. When you walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ in Nazareth, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, when you walk through the Via Dolorosa and you realize what happened here 2,000 years ago, and you understand that this is the cradle of our existence, our culture, our beliefs, I think it is an opportunity for Israel to become a gateway, maybe a bridge between different faiths, different religions. This is what we try to do here. Unfortunately, not everyone agrees. Some would like to have a monopoly. Take a look at the Temple Mount, for instance. We say And unfortunately, it is not the situation, although at 1967 we so-called liberated the Temple Mount, that everyone should enjoy free movement on the Temple Mount. Everyone should enjoy free practice of their religion. Those who want to say Shema Israel can say Shema Israel. Those who want to say Allahu Akbar can say Allahu Akbar, or whatever you want to do. But the Muslims don't allow that. They say no. If you go onto Temple Mount, you cannot say Shema Israel. You can only say Allahu Akbar. And if you do that, unfortunately, this is a very poor demonstration of sovereignty that we have there. We have accepted it. Back in 1967, this is the status quo to this point. We don't want to pray instead of anyone else, but alongside with everyone else. This is what we think should be done in Jerusalem. This is what we think should be done in the world. No one should force their beliefs, but rather practice them freely alongside with everyone else who wants to practice it. This is the difference between a world of freedom versus a world of tyranny.
And finally, Amir, do you have a word for our viewers, a word of encouragement about how vital and how important it is to support Israel and the Jewish people at this critical time in world history?
Well, I have a good word for all of our friends throughout the world, and many of them are non-Jews. And I'm talking about the United States of America. I'm talking about some people in Europe, very significant. I'm talking about those states who should recognize that when a country recognizes a city as their capital, they should respect it the way we respect every country in the world that claims that this and that are their capital and move their embassies here. I think we will have more and more of that. I would like to say to our non-Jews viewers that we in Israel are a society of minorities. We have no choice but being pluralistic and accepting, which we are. And if you would walk in the streets of Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or wherever you would go, you would see with your own eyes how open, how pluralistic, how accepting is the Israeli society. And it's a great honor for me to represent the Israeli people in this parliament, which is a great mosaic of the Israeli society. You would see everything here, Jews, Arab, non-Jews, you would see everything, Druze, women, men, new immigrants, everything that you have within the Israeli society, you would have here in the parliament. It's a source of great pride for me.
Fantastic. Amir, keep up the superb work that you're doing here in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset. An absolute pleasure to see you again and to interview you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I do wish you have a great time here in Israel, here in Jerusalem, and travel safe home.
Thank you. Toda rabah.
Toda.